Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. So I'm going to take a page out of Sherry's book and basically say, so I'm black. I'm categorized as African American, and when I first became a chair in 2008, there was only one other African American gentleman who was chair, and that was Marcus Martin. Since then, there's been a 300% increase in the diversity of African American chairs in emergency medicine. I think there are a couple of things I'm going to actually talk about. One is that if you don't have access to WMC data, I really urge you to take a real deep dive and take a look at it. It really does provide a sense of what the real issues are. And I'm going to make the comment that we oftentimes can define the problem, the extent of the problem, in terms of how significant the problem is. But I think the harder part is really defining the significance of the problem. And I think when we think about our work groups and we think about those sorts of things, we have to think about the significance of that problem. Now, I'm not sure if, okay, yeah, perfect. So I'm going to skip the slides. It's actually, not having slides is pretty liberating, I would think. I could wax extemporaneously and not be stopped now. So there is a book, actually, I like to look at books and read books, obviously, outside of medicine, and I think that one of the things I read about recently on the plane over here, matter of fact, is Agile Leadership. I'm not sure if you've heard about that. And I always think about how do you apply that to healthcare, right? How do we think about those sorts of things? There's a book written by a guy by the name of Howard Ross, who really, it was called Reinventing Diversity. And what he did is we really took a look at what's the impact of diversity if we truly had equity? What was the economic impact? Okay, and the statistics really were very interesting. The number of CEOs in Fortune 500 companies won't be 32 in terms of women; they'll be 65. Right? 2 million more high school graduates, 2 million more managerial jobs. The economic impact is substantial if you think about it. There would be 12 African American chairs of emergency medicine if we truly had parity. Right? Now think about the impact of that. Think about the problems that will be solved. Think about the emphasis that people will have. Think about the research ideas that people will bring to the table. You know, one of my perspectives, I think, as I approach this, and someone mentioned the fact that it's not just at the chair level, but at the institutional level. So I represent the College of Medicine as a senior representative of the WMC, and I'm actually serving the Diversity Task Force also for ASAP. But institutionally also I lead the Diversity Council, which was quite by accident, a matter of fact. I was asked a couple of times, and initially I said no before I actually said yes. A couple of really very interesting observations. One is when we think about recruiting faculty, first of all, we have to understand that, and I told my dean euphemistically that, you know, this was established because, you know, there was something coming down the pike. The LCME accreditation, a big part of it is obviously the diversity pipeline. And of course it was far deeper than that, but it was actually perfect timing, if I would say. And they really do emphasize the fact that we have a pipeline problem, as this has been discussed, right? And what is our institutional's responsibility to really address that problem? And I think that's a strategic issue, okay? Because there are only so much of us that can actually get recruited. So when the dean comes to me and says, well, we need more diverse faculty, I'm like, well, where are you getting that diverse faculty from, right? Because there's only a small pool and we're robbing from another institution in order to fulfill our own goals. But the second and more important part is, what about the retention piece, okay? When we think about retaining or recruiting people, we oftentimes hear about this concept of fit. Did they fit us? Did they fit our institutional whatever? And you got to turn that on the head. You got to really then emphasize whether or not your institution can actually support the goals and the objectives of that individual faculty member, because that's what leads to the retention eventually. So we have to think about that very carefully. So when I think about how we actually sort of frame the problem, we know that the problem exists. We know that it's a significant problem. We have to really wrestle with the significance of the problem. We have to understand what our ideal state is, and then the journey and the resources we need to get there. And so this is really an institutional strategy. The institution has to really adjust and change their values in order to really impact the retention process, the recruitment process, but also to deal with really societal fundamentals, right? Because we know that the issues of disparities, or even the issues with regards to what we actually see in the statistics, is really an economic and an educational issue, fundamentally. And our institutions really have to focus on addressing that problem. So I think if you think about the framework in terms of how I've described it, being able to understand the significance of the problem, and then really understanding what that ideal state is, and then what are the barriers that will prevent you from getting to that state, and what are the resources required in order for you to get to that state, I think that's particularly important. I had a slide here, but you guys could take a look at it, that not only showed the data with regards to the faculty in emergency medicine, but the faculty in academic medicine across the board. And it's actually done by rank and also by ethnicity, okay, and also by gender. And it's pretty amazing to see the data. And what Sherry made mention of is the fact that, yeah, as you go up the ranks, you've got fewer and fewer folks, okay? Actually, I know the stats for emergency medicine chairs by heart, right? So there are 3 of Asian origin, there are 3 African Americans, 1 man, 2 men, 1 woman. There are 3 folks of Hispanic origin, okay? And that's kind of it. There are 89 white males, okay, and 7 women, which is what I actually counted. We have this issue within our midst. I want us to think about what does parity mean, what is the definition of parity, and what would the impact be. And based upon that impact, I think we have to have then that understanding of that is the goal, that's really what's going to drive the strategy to get there. So it's both an institutional large strategy, but also perhaps what you'll be talking about in the in round tables, and what are the micro strategies will also get us there. Because there are micro strategies actually that will help to support what we do. And a lot of it is our investment in the process, and also our institution valuing that investment, whether it's mentoring, okay, or whether it's actually really interacting with the pipeline programs that really define and help to sort of, I think, ameliorate the basic fundamental problems, which I think there's institutional responsibility for.